Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Challenge Wrap Up podcast for a special episode. Ali Lasher could not be with me this week, but I do have the great Sydney Bucksbaum, the author of How to Win at the Challenge and Life, basically the gospel on the challenge. Very excited to have her here with me. So, Sydney, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. I am so excited to be here.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure to have you here. We've been trying to lock this in for a few weeks now. Your book came out October 25th, so it's already on the shelves, ready to go. If
Mhm.
people want to pick it up, so first we'll just start with that. Where can people find it? Because I'm sure after this they're going to want to read all about it. So where can people find the book and go ahead and purchase it?
Yeah, it is available wherever books are sold, whether you get them from Amazon, Barnes and Noble, real actual bookstores. A friend actually texted me a photo that he saw it on a bookshelf in an actual bookstore, which I
Amazing.
was so wild to me. So yeah, wherever you buy your books, it's available there.
Perfect. And so I just wanted to jump in first immediately. We just kind of understanding your challenge kind of backstory. Like what made you fall so in love with this show and like this world that you wanted to like basically write the book on it because you wrote the book on it. So like what is it about the challenge that you just fell in love with?
Yeah, I started watching it way back in like the late 90s when it premiered as not even a show called The Challenge.
Hmm.
I was only 8 years old when it first premiered, so I didn't really understand quite a lot of the social aspects of it. But I don't know, there's just something about how real all of the people are. They're not trying to be fake. They're really, I mean, back then it was less of a competition, but
Sure.
the way that it's evolved has also made me love it even more because it's become something totally new and different through all its different eras. And the fact that we've seen most of the same people throughout the past 20 something years and you've seen them grow and change, it feels like I'm watching a really extended soap opera of the
Hmm.
same characters. And I also just love the social and analytical aspects of the game. I'm a huge fan of a lot of reality competition shows like Survivor, and the way that people approach the game from different ways is always so fascinating to me. So yeah, I've been a fan of it for my entire life basically, and then I'm also a pop culture journalist, so I've been covering it at Entertainment Weekly for the past few years, and building the coverage there has been really fun. And then when this book opportunity came along, it just felt like this amazing full circle moment.
Yeah, so the way the book works, you kind of dive in. I think it's 21 former winners,
Hmm.
and you kind of go through kind of each of their individual backstories about how they win, things they've overcome, and kind of very cool behind the scenes stories from each of them. So, how did you land on like this crop of winners? Because obviously, 38 seasons has been a number of different winners. So what was about these winners that you really wanted to highlight?
Yeah, it was really interesting how it unfolded because when MTV Books brought the idea to me, they basically like had the title and the idea for the book already hammered out, but they had no idea who the champs would be or like what format the book would take. So that was all up to me. And so I gave them a wish list of about like 58 champions that I would just love to know more about their story. I mean, obviously, like the big ones are up there, like
Yep.
CT, Johnny Bananas, like Wes. I put forth like a huge long list, including basically anyone you would want to hear from about how they won the challenge. And then from there, it was just whoever replied, whoever
Hmm.
wanted to be in it. There were a few that initially said that they wanted to be in it and then just stopped responding. And so it was, yeah,
Boo, boo.
there were a few really good ones that I was so excited when they said yes, and then when they just stopped responding or ghosted the interview,
Oh no.
it was really heartbreaking. So I'm really excited about the ones that actually came through and did the interviews because everyone was so open and honest, and a lot of them got really vulnerable in ways that we
Yeah.
haven't seen from them on the show. So it was just a really cool experience with the ones who actually did the interviews.
Yeah, because I loved, you kind of had. I think some of it was also some of the rival of All Stars, but you had some like the old school winners going back to like Yes and like people from back
Mhm.
in the day, and then obviously the current winners. So whose stories do you think stuck out kind of a little bit more? People who won, 10, 15 years ago, like who's kind of the stories really resonated with you that you spoke with?
Yeah, it's interesting because there were some people who I expected their interviews to go one way and then it went a completely different way. Like Jordan Wisely, he's one of the newer competitors, one of the newer winners. He's still on the show now, but he was looking back on his past with, I think, a much more mature perspective than I was
Hmm.
expecting from him. Because I mean, we've seen him on the show, not really being very open and vulnerable and honest and mature. So it was amazing to see how he shed his persona to be honest about his time on the show. And then I mean, Johnny Bananas, if you're not listening to his Spotify podcast, you probably haven't heard him, shed his persona as well. And so he was just a real human being looking back on his, 20 something seasons with a very different eye than I would have expected. I loved Landon's interview because he has been out of the challenge world for so long. And I was honestly blown away that he even wanted to be involved in the book, because he's kind of stepped back from the public life and had kept his life really private. And so I got to dive deep with him about why he hasn't come back and what he thought about his experience on the show. I loved getting to talk with Jodie Weatherton, because I think she is one of the all-time best competitors, not just of, the women competitors, but just out of everyone in general. And it was amazing to hear from her, because this was before she had come back for All Stars 2. Right. And so people hadn't heard from her in a while. But yeah, there were so many different perspectives too. Like, I loved hearing from Cynthia, who was on the very first season of the challenge. Like, her experience on the show was very different from everyone else that I had interviewed. And it was amazing to hear just how everyone had taken their experiences and applied it to their real lives, because some of them have really changed their lives because of what happened on the show.
Yeah, one person I was actually kind of surprised to see pop up was Cara Maria, because we just had the 4-part challenge doc where she was very noticeably not a part of it. Talked about a lot, but not a part of it. So what did you pick up from her, speaking with her, where she feels she sits right now in like the challenge world? Because I think there's a lot of people wanting for her to come back. I think there's still a lot of resentment with things that went down with like her and Paulie's that situation on the show. So where does she see herself fitting in like the challenge world right now?
Yeah. Fun fact, I was also shocked that she wasn't in the docuseries, because I am the one that you see in the series talking about her and all of her achievements, because I 100% thought she was going to give an interview. Right. So that had me scratching my head. I didn't realize that I'd become the Cara Maria spokesperson on accident, but I will take that job because I love her. I think she's one of the best of all time. And yeah, it was interesting talking with her too, because she also doesn't really know why she hasn't been back on the show. Like, she took some time off intentionally because she saw that she basically understands why everyone hated her on War of the Worlds 2. And she regrets how her attitude on the show and how that all went down. And so she took some time away. She worked on herself. She talked a lot about how she has gotten back to be the Cara Maria that people love and would root for. And she sees that she's better as the underdog than like someone running the game. And so she definitely wants to come back. And it's fascinating to see that she wasn't invited to do the docuseries. And I don't know what that means for her future, but she definitely wants to get back into the world. And I think if she does, we'll see a Cara Maria that we used to know and love from back in the day.
I would love that for sure. So obviously you go through, these are all winners that you talked to. Was there any thought to include anyone that like just almost has won, has never won, that people would be wanting to win? Or did you really just want to focus on like the winners and their stories about how they, succeeded on the show?
Yeah, I think for this book specifically, even with like the title alone, like MTV just wanted winners, I would be so interested in either doing another book or even just, more interviews of people who have come so close. And because I think that experience is extremely different from the champions. But I would have loved to include TJ. I think he's one of the biggest winners of the challenge without ever having played. But yeah, no, this one was just focusing on the actual winners. So
yeah. Is there anyone that you want to see win really badly so they can be included in like the version 2 of this? Like who were you like, damn, I wish they got their win so I can just include them in this?
Yes, Leroy. Leroy is like one of the best to play the game, and yet he's never won. And I think a lot of that is because he wasn't trying as hard as he was in his final season on Double Agents. But
Yeah.
I think if he had played the way that he played on Double Agents throughout his entire career, he absolutely would be a multi-time winner at this
Yeah.
point.
Mm-hmm. So I kind of want to get back to the documentary because like this book kind of coincides very well with that. So how did you feel the formal documentary kind of covered kind of the evolution of the challenge as well? What were your thoughts on like how MTV specifically covered kind of their own show?
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was really, really creative how they formatted it. I feel like they were able to cover a lot in such a short amount of time. I also think that they could have gone a lot deeper. I think there
Mm-hmm.
were a lot of things that were glossed over and not even mentioned and not touched upon. That is such a big part of the challenge franchise that I think a lot of fans who know the show were
Mm-hmm.
left wanting more and like not in a good way. I think they were trying to focus on just the good parts, but you
Yep.
also, the bad parts go hand in hand with that. So I understand why they would want to not mention some names or some moments, but I think
Mm-hmm.
to make a docu-series about the entire history of something, you have to include the low moments as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that's something Ali and I definitely both talked about how, they kind of glossed over a little bit with some of the Jordan stuff in his past and some other things in people's past, and then very noticeably not mentioning people's names that couldn't be part
Yeah.
of it. But I think the challenge has been on the air for 20 plus years. There's going to be scandals that come along the way. No show is
Hmm.
perfect. So I found it very disappointing, like you said, about that they wouldn't, touch on it. Like, show how much you've overcome, so how much you've changed. Like the challenge has really tried to make an effort to change and kind of grow with the times. And sometimes on some issues, they've been ahead of the times and they've talked about
Hmm.
that too, which is great. But then also show like where things they have to catch up on. So that was one part that I was a little disappointed they didn't, talk about and like, show their own faults.
Yeah, that's so real. And we've seen it in recent seasons too about how the show is trying to be better than it was in the past. And I think in some instances, the show goes a little bit too far, like in the
Hmm.
censorship of like some people have made mistakes in recent seasons. And instead of, showing it and explaining it, they just kind of cut them out. And it felt the same way with the docuseries. But there's been so many instances where the show has gotten better in so many ways that it feels almost unfair to not show that growth because it has improved and it
Yeah.
has evolved in really helpful and impactful ways. And I just don't think it touched on that enough.
Hmm. I know you mentioned you're also a fan of Survivor.
Hmm.
In the last few seasons, Survivor's kind of dubbed itself in like it's the new era of Survivor, and I kind of feel like the challenge is a little bit in that too. With the last few years, where they really added a lot of international players from every show possibly imaginable, and then really kind of doubling down on like this new crop of vets like Tori and Devin and people like that. So how do you view kind of the state of the challenge right now? Do you feel like it's in a good place? Are you kind of worried about the direction it's going? What are your kind of feelings right now about where the challenge is?
I did start to get worried in the last season because it did feel like there were too many new people, and
Hmm.
I, I mean, we're only 6 episodes into this new season, and it feels like it definitely has course corrected. Like there's a lot more recognizable faces. The spy theme is gone. It feels really back
Yes.
to the basics, and I think the simpler the better when it comes to that. And so I do think we have been in a new era because it was really necessary. Most of our fan favorite winners and players are definitely aging out and can't do
Hmm.
this the way that they used to. And so they need new blood. But I think they were trying to bring in too much at the same time. And when the rookies outnumber the vets and the rookies that like we've never even seen before on like American TV shows, I think that
Hmm.
that was turning a lot of people off because yeah, we come for the challenges and the eliminations and the politicking, but at its core, we all come back for these characters. And if we don't have the recognizable faces that bring us back season after season, you're just gonna lose your entire fan base. So I love
Yeah.
that this season they're leaning into like the old school and new school vets and like especially from this week's episode alone, they're like all the vets have become fired up in a way that feels like old school challenge. And
Hmm.
I'm so excited to see where the franchise goes from here because it seems like the fans are really responding well to this season and
Yep.
it's a new era, but it still feels like classic challenge.
Yeah. Are there any specific changes or format ideas you've had that you're like hoping you could kind of like drop a line to a producer like, hey, why don't you do something like this? Is there anything you want them to try to push the do a little bit more in the future seasons?
Yeah, I want to see Invasion of the Champions, but done the right way. That is the biggest missed opportunity in the challenge history. The fact that they had all of these incredible champions on a team together, and then instead of having them actually go against the underdogs, they had to go against each other. And I wanted to see the champions wipe the floor with those underdogs, but they were always outnumbered by like at least 2 people, and it just felt like a waste of a season, and it was such a good idea. So yeah, I want them to do Invasion of the Champions, but the right way.
Yeah. So one of the other big developments from the Challenge world was obviously the Challenge USA spinoff this year, and then I think the Challenge Australia version is going on now, and then a couple other ones, and then I imagine like the World Championship thing will happen sometime next year. So what do you think? Why now for that type of show? Like, why do you think CBS and MTV kind of pull the cord to kind of do that now? What kind of caused that in your mind? Do you think to really push that new spinoff?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a really boring answer, and I think it comes down to the CBS MTV like Viacom merger, and now they're all owned by the same company, so they can have this cross network franchise. I mean, Paramount Plus, we saw the success of All Stars, and I think that just showed that the challenge could exist in more places than just MTV.
Yep.
It's such a boring answer, but I'm so happy that it exists because the Challenge USA was incredible. I know that the finale ended in such a disappointing way, and I could talk about that for hours, but I think that it was a success minus the way that it ended, because they brought all of these really legendary players from these other shows, and we got to see them take on the challenge with their different show strategies. And I mean, it was fantastic. I hope that we get more seasons of it. I'm cautiously excited for the Global Champion spinoff. Let's just hope that they have a better final.
Prepare for the cold. Prepare for the cold if you're gonna go climbing up a mountain. Yeah, that whole season, even like the whole time, it just felt like a giant fever dream where you're seeing like Tyson and TJ interact. It's like the type of thing that someone like pitches in like a fan forum, and you're like, get out, this thing's never gonna happen. It was just so bizarre, and it ended. Unfortunately, would be a word you can use to describe it, but I think it's the type of thing where you're gonna look back on in a couple of years, and I think you're gonna remember the good things, and then just look at the train wreck of a finale. But it kind of makes it iconic, like the fact that like it's one of the more iconic moments in like the CBS, Viacom, MTV world that like you're never gonna forget it. So at least people who are part of it to kind of enjoy it. And then also All Stars is a spinoff. What are your feelings on kind of the rival of people coming from the past? Are you enjoying All Stars as the spinoff as well?
Oh my God, yeah. I think the introduction of All Stars has been one of the best things to happen to the challenge. It brought back that OG feeling, but like, I mean, I'll never forget watching the very first episode where they're having all of these like 40s, 50s, like older players who are not as in shape anymore. And they're all expecting backyard games, and they're thrown into an actual like daily challenge that we're seeing on the main franchise. And like everyone was DQing, people needed to be dragged out of the water by the paramedics. Like I was laughing, and the music just made it even more comedic. And ever since that episode, I was like, I know that this is a hit. This was an instant hit. It's just such a different vibe than the main flagship, which I still love the main flagship, but like this, it's just a great addition. It's bringing back a lot of old fans too, who have dropped off with watching the challenge. So it's only growing the fandom even more. And I think there's nothing but good things about it.
Yeah, and honestly, that was one of my favorite chapters of your book was the John A chapter, because John A has been I think one of the more interesting people in like the challenge world over the last few years. Like her renaissance from where she was like with Zach and that horrible relationship on the challenge proper to now her emerging as like this queen bee, and she kind of goes into that like evolution of herself as a person on the show. So the John A stuff I found to just be one of the more interesting people on the show. What was your like vibe like talking to her? Did you get the same kind of similar story?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The fun fact about that, I actually did John A's interview before All Stars 3 aired. And so I actually had to do a follow-up interview with her after, because like like, I mean, all the people on MTV side were like, you have to include All Stars 3. And I was like,
Right.
I haven't seen it. So I had to do a second interview with her to make sure that we got all the details about that, because to go from never making it to a single final, having one of the most abysmal elimination records, to then winning 2 championships back to back.
Yep.
In like literally immediately after making it all the way to the finish line of the final and tying with another woman for like the first place of the women, that 7 months postpartum, no less. Like
Yep.
she really came
Incredible.
back as and proved why she's one of the best in the game, which is like, if you would have said that about Janae during her regular run, everyone would have thought that you were crazy.
Yep. Would you like to see her or anyone else that's been on All Stars kind of make the leap back to proper, or do you kind of like keeping these worlds a little bit separate?
I do like how, I mean, they're not really separate though, because we're seeing Darrell, Veronica, Jordan, like Wes, everyone's kind of going to both now. So I don't think that distinction really exists anymore. But for the people who have come back for All Stars and who haven't made it to the flagship, I don't know. Like, I don't think Janae would do as well on the flagship, because I think she I don't know. That's actually a really interesting question. I haven't thought about that. I think people,
it would be tough for her, because like how like I think what she does so well is building the connections, which I think she could do fresh out the gate, but not, you know, how is she going to connect with like Horacio like coming to new season? I think it'll be very difficult. Even like some of the newer vets, like I don't know how close she is with like Tori and Devin and stuff like that. So I think it would be a bit of a hurdle for her to get through. But I at this point, I'm not going to count Janae out of anything. If she does it, I think she can do it. But I would find it to be difficult for her to kind of do it.
Yeah, I mean, we've also seen that exact issue with Darrell. Like, he's having such a hard time connecting with these like 20-something new rookies, and he's at this point he's like stopped even trying. And I think obviously Janae has a much better social game than Darrell, but I think she would face a lot of the same issues.
Yeah. So obviously, you know, you touched on you covered CT and Bananas as kind of a 5-time champ, 7-time champ, and ever since CT's last win, the big debate, as I feel like, has kind of popped up about who was the GOAT of the challenge. I think they even did that as a full episode on the challenge doc. So in your expert mind, person who wrote the book on the challenge, who in Sydney's mind is the GOAT of the challenge?
I get in such trouble for this because my Entertainment Weekly colleague and we actually made a ranking of the top 50 challengers. And, you know, before Johnny won his 7th, oh no, it was, before CT won his 4th championship, we had Bananas as number 1. And as soon as CT won his 4th, we put CT as number 1. And then once he got his 5th win, that was solidified. And we've gotten so much hate over that. People are very passionate about it. I've been contacted by people who are both on the list and not on the list about why the list is wrong. People feel very strongly about it, so I get in trouble for this a lot. But CT is the absolute GOAT. I think he has it all. He's got the brains, he's got the brawn, he's got the social politics. You don't want to go against him in anything. You don't want to go against him in a daily challenge, in an elimination, or a final. He will beat you hands down. No one can play the game like he does. He does it all from his shadows. He has all of these political deals. He knows how to fly under the radar. He also can do really well when he's public enemy number 1. Nobody can do it like him.
If he comes back again, he's coming back single. So now he'll have all the women kind of flocking him again. So he's got that part to play as well. So who was the most vocal that was upset about either being off the list or down the list? I don't want you to spoil your sources, but I would love to know who was most upset about where they stood or didn't stand.
I mean, they were not anonymous because they posted it on their own social media. So Corey and Nelson felt some type of way because they were not on the list at all.
Nelson, I mean, we realized, Nelson, you haven't won a daily in 7 years. Like, I don't think you could be on the list of top players ever.
Because we do have some non-winners on the list, but for reasons that, you know, they're great at the game. And I just, as much as I love watching Corey and Nelson and I love seeing their evolution and how much better they've gotten at the game, I don't think we'll ever see them win. I don't think they have number one, you have to be able to do a puzzle on your own. and like be good at doing a puzzle, because
Sure.
there's going to be times during a final where you're going to have to do a puzzle on your own. And I don't think we've seen both of them fail in that many, many times. So
Yeah.
I think you have to have that one skill to win
Yeah.
among
So
the
obviously,
actors.
so I think we're 6 episodes into Ride or Dies now. So what are your feelings on the current season? How do you think the format is going? Pairing people that are friends together. What are your thoughts on the format?
I love this season. I love so many things about it. I think the format is fantastic. The fact that it is forcing people to make so many enemies whenever they have power. I think the one downside to that is we're seeing a lot of the people who could win daily challenges are maybe not trying to win at this point
Right.
because they don't want the blood on their hands. But I think that it's created so much real drama and not fake drama. I love seeing people paired. I love how it's the exact opposite of Rivals, because Rivals is my favorite. Like Rivals 1 is my favorite season of all time,
Me
and
as
my
well.
favorite format.
Yeah.
And having it be this like loving mirror image of that is just really fascinating. I love seeing people who can actually depend on their teammate and want their teammate to do well, because it's kind of, we saw how toxic it was in like Rivals and X's when they didn't support their teammate.
Hmm.
So that's really great. I don't understand why they have some of the pairs that they do. I think
Yeah.
I think a lot of people were given the choice to bring someone from home that like they should have had someone from the show that like
Right.
we've seen why they're ride or dies. A lot of the rookies, like we don't know why they're ride or dies. We've seen
Right.
really nothing from them. So I think that the pairs could have been picked a little bit better. But I mean, aside from those like small complaints, this season has been
Hmm.
fantastic. It
Yeah.
has been only a few episodes, and I'm so invested in the drama. We've gotten some really shocking decisions, some great eliminations. Already so many hookups, which I think the past few seasons have really been missing.
It has been, yeah. I mean, everyone. I'm using the last few seasons. Everyone's like married in relationships, and now, I mean, sorry to see their relationship is fall, but all these relationships are falling apart. But at least now they're coming in single, so at least there's, we got some of that to look forward to.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why the challenge is so different from any other reality competition series is you've got a lot of like the highbrow
Hmm.
competition aspects, but you also have the lowbrow where people are getting drunk and hooking up, and you have all that relationship drama. And like the fact that this one show has both sides of that is really
Hmm.
special. And I mean, there were a few seasons, I think it was like Double Agents maybe, where we knew that there were hookup arcs happening in the house and just none of it made the show. I think that
Yeah.
that is such a mistake. You have to have all of that to make it
Yeah.
a real season of the challenge.
It's odd, especially because the last few years they moved to these 90-minute episodes, so they have so much time to kind of cover stuff. And I know obviously like the daily and the elimination are gonna be a good chunk of it, but they have a lot of extra time that they can use to include these like goofy moments or the relationship stuff that I feel like the fans really want just as much, if not sometimes more, than the jumping off the building and like the intense elimination. So I don't know what like this current production team is going for, that they don't want to include that. But I feel like that is the secret sauce that makes the challenge the challenge. It's not just if you want people watch to do extreme stuff, you go watch like a professional sport or like a lot of other things. You can watch competitions. It's like that the relationship building that the challenge has. That I don't know why they steer away from that sometimes when that's like what makes the show.
Yeah, exactly. And you're so right. Like the move to 90 minutes has been amazing because there always is so much more that we could see. And yet in previous seasons we still weren't getting enough. And I feel like this season we're finally getting the perfect balance. Like we have
Yeah.
so like, obviously there's a lot to see in the challenge and elimination, but we're also getting so much house drama. And I think that once again they're finding the perfect balance. And I think they're doing everything right this season so far.
Yeah.
So
And then last thing, just going back to your book for 1 second, is there anyone that you kind of came in before speaking with like a preconceived notion of them, either positive or negatively, and then after speaking with them, it really flipped? I guess we'll keep it positive. So anyone you didn't have like a great feeling about, and then afterwards you're like, oh, this person's like really awesome. I really wish I was rooting for them more. I'm going to root for them more in the future. Anyone that really stood out for you?
Oh, that is a really good question. Hmm. Let me think. Because there were, I mean, a lot of them went in very different directions than I expected. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really know what to expect from Derek Kaczynski's interview
Mm-hmm.
because he always just seems very like wanting to have a good time, almost larger than life personality, and he he came to the interview with a lot more like emotion than I expected. Like I got to see just how much he really wanted to get his first win, and just how hard it was for him to get it, and then how that changed his life moving forward. So yeah, he really surprised me in that way. Um, Rachel Robinson too, her interview was amazing. We had obviously learned on Dirty 30 that she and Veronica actually were in a relationship that wasn't shown
Mm-hmm.
on the show. So I wasn't expecting her to talk about that relationship as open as she did, and she got really honest about how she regrets not having that be shown on screen, because that would have been a major step forward for
Yeah.
representation on TV. And so that was a really a big pleasant surprise for me.
Mm-hmm. And then obviously, so the book is not just how to win at the challenge; it's how to win challenge and life. So, is there any key takeaway that you've started to apply to yourself that you've learned when you were writing this book that you feel like you're making yourself a better person or making yourself more successful? Any key takeaway that you've had?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, when I was told what the angle of the book was going to be, I was not really expecting there to be much self-help guidance from a bunch of reality TV stars.
Mm-hmm.
But I was really I was fascinated by how everyone had different lessons that they took from their time on the show, but the biggest common denominator was how they learned more from their mistakes and their failures than they did from their successes, and how they would all take their lowest moments and learn from them and grow from that, instead of just using their success to push them through life. And so I think that that was a really great way to kind of reframe your own way of looking at your life. And nobody's success is a linear line going up. Everyone has peaks and valleys, and I think looking at any low points in your life, and reframing it as, what, there's something to be learned from this, rather than, oh my god, I've failed, I've messed up at something.
Mm-hmm.
That's just helped me overall
Yeah.
since doing all these interviews.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. So Sydney, this was so great to chat with you. Really appreciate everything. Where can people keep up with you? Where can they find all your work? Obviously, we talked about the book and finding that, but what about just anything that you're in particularly working on?
Yeah, you can find all my work at ew.com, or on Twitter and Instagram at SydneyBucksbaum. That's pretty much where I post everything. So
Maybe just Instagram after this episode might just be Instagram. So make sure you follow her there because Twitter might be dead by the time this posts. So you never know. But fantastic. And obviously, you can subscribe to this. Rob has a website.com/challenge iTunes. Me and Allie will be back recapping episode 6 soon. So be look out for that. Follow me, Cohen Brown _. And that's it. Sydney, thank you so much again. Everyone buy the book. It's a great read. Very fascinating stuff. A lot of cool insights. So check that out for sure. Until next time, have a good one.